Hello guys, Termex here, and welcome back to another episode of the Borderlands Retrospective series. First and foremost, I do want to apologize for the lack of uploads recently. Just recently, I did go over into Twitch streaming, so if you want to check me out over on Twitch, make sure you guys, it'll be on screen right now, link in the description. Anywhere on my socials, you will find my Twitch link. And overall, I just been focusing on that, focusing on Destiny 2 Lightfall. New World's getting some updates soon, so that's been catching my mind. But I do love the Borderlands series, and in general, content has kind of been hard right now with my scheduling and all that, but enough of me. Let's get into why the Fight for Sanctuary DLC kinda ruined Borderlands 2. Now, right off the bat, that's a pretty bold statement for me to assume, saying that this DLC ruined the entire game, as if it wasn't already broken in many ways. But yes, this DLC, which came out on June 9th, 2019, was a free DLC expansion, I should note, DLC expansion for Borderlands 2. For a DLC to come out for free for a game that released 7 years ago is kind of crazy, so you gotta give Gearbox some credit in that aspect. But a lot of players were not happy because it was only free for the first week, and after that, you had to pay the full price of $14.99 for this simple DLC. But what did the DLC provide with this price tag? Well, you get a full-on story DLC, and it shifted the entire level 72 OP8 system over to level 80 OP10, effectively adding 2 more OP levels to the entire game. Around this point was the same time where Gearbox implemented the level 30 character creator, to where you could pick any single character in the game and boost them to level 30, effectively skipping the first entire playthrough of the series. Basically, the people that hated playing through the story campaign 3 times, it allowed them to only play through it 2 times, which was still a lot better than 3 times, because in Borderlands 3, 2 times wasn't too bad, but Borderlands 3, we're not going to get into that. But there was a big cause for uproar in the entire Borderlands community once they seen that this DLC was $15, basically the same price as a Tiny Tina Assault on Dragon Keep DLC. But in my opinion, it did provide the story campaign DLC. It added brand new rarities, brand new bosses, another raid boss, and a lot of things to do in general, as well as the new gask mechanic. Basically, if you're in a certain spore clustered area, you have a certain amount of resistance to it, and if you don't leave in a certain amount of time, you will effectively just perish. But why, Term? Why is this DLC so dang bad for the game, and how did it quote-unquote ruin the entire game? Well, as somebody that wasn't a traditional fan of the OP level system, I did love Raid on Digistruct Peak. I just did not like the fact that after 1 or 2 OP levels, your whole gear set was effectively useless, and if you wanted to use the same build, you had to go through the same exact grind you just went through 2 OP levels ago, which could be a matter of hours if you're good at the game. So you have to refarm everything that you just farmed, effectively making the same repetitive gameplay loop over and over and over again. And there was no satisfaction for gaining these OP levels. There wasn't any gear or guns locked behind the OP levels. Sure, some drops may have been way easier to obtain during Digistruct Peak and World Drops and dedicated farms, because Doc Mercy spawns, Scorch Jr. spawns, or Scorch rather, wrong game. Dukino's mom even spawns, so a lot of different enemies that would effectively help you, but you could arguably farm those exact enemies a lot faster by other means, which I think is really cool, because if we go over to something like the Borderlands 2 Exodus mod, something I'm streaming on Twitch, that mod gives you a bonus and locks specific weaponry behind the OP levels, similar to how Borderlands 3 did with its Mayhem levels in Mayhem 6 Plus exclusives. If Borderlands 2 would have done something like this, I think the OP levels would have been a little bit more redeeming, but what aggravates me the most is they knew the OP levels were something not a lot of players enjoyed, and it wasn't well implemented. And you have to remember, the game was a little older back then, so we don't know all the things we know today, but they did in 2019. They knew that all the community did not really enjoy doing the same thing over and over again, and this was their chance to redeem themselves with this DLC 7 years later and effectively fix that entire issue. Did they make it a little bit easier? I will admit they did. OP10 is a lot easier to hit than OP8 in my opinion, just because I feel like a lot of the weapons and a lot of the extra skill points you have definitely help out within that grind. But this was such a great time to maybe change how it works, maybe lock the Effervescent rarity behind the OP levels and not just simply the Commander Lilith DLC. That would give a lot of players way more incentive to grind OP levels as opposed to just doing it for the hell of it. The most fun I've ever had on Borderlands 2 is effectively staying at level 72 with no OP levels and having fun that way, because I feel like that is the best standpoint within the series to have enough balance and enough fun with the game and try whatever build you would like. Well, yes, I know, the comments are already getting written up of the hardcore Borderlands gamers that OP10 max level is the only way to do it, and you better only run this build. It lets you min-max, yada yada. I do agree. Similar to something like GMs in Destiny 2, there should be a very effectively hard piece of content within the game, and I do think OP10 provides that level of difficulty. My issue is when you provide that level of difficulty, but you seclude the player to such cookie-cutter setups that it just makes it unfun generally, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of using the same exact setup on every character that everyone else runs because it's just the most effective. If you don't know what that is a meta. Most games have a meta, which just stands for most effective tactic available. If you do not know, now you know. And I honestly think that Borderlands 2, prior to OP levels in general, didn't have that issue. But when OP8 dropped, it was a mess. Before they fixed the OP8 scaling early on, it was a mess. B shield or nothing, or you're just slogging through everything, if I'm being honest. Is there other ways to play the game other than B shield? Of course. Is it the best way? Arguably, 90% of the time it's not, but there is some great setups that outperform the B by miles. The B shield affected the scaling, I will say that, because I feel Gearbox scaled future content based on the fact that they knew that players had a B shield, so content felt normal with it on, and some content just felt like it needed it equipped, which is very annoying. But it did kill build diversity in my opinion, because in OP10, you really didn't have much effective setups, and it kind of ruined the balance of most characters, and it made all the issues that previously were kind of little nitpicks very major flaws in character design. If you look over to Gage with her certain skills like Blood-Soaked Shield, sure, that is a great skill if you're getting fast kills, but guess what? In OP10, you're not really killing that fast with Gage unless you have Max Anarchy already, so you can kind of see where certain game designs start to falter a little bit. Something as simple as Maya's Cataclysm tree, when she gets the little Cataclysm Storm of all the elements, on OP10, that basically doesn't do jack, but comparatively on level 72, you could get probably 25% of an enemy's health bar chunked down simply from that one skill, but on OP10, they just regen right through it. So a lot of skills are effectively not as useful anymore, or just straight out garbage, and you're only going for the cookie cutter meta things that will benefit you the most. Yes, you could argue that's min-maxing, but in the same standpoint, it's also making people play a certain way without giving them the freedom to do what they want. And talking about the Effervescent rarity, the Effervescent rarity was really well designed in my opinion. They maybe could have done the skins a little different, but I get it, effervescent, pearlescent, whimsical. But my issue with that is when they did add this rarity, they made it very overperforming and kind of just power crept versions of legendary weapons. And then we still have pearlescents, which were miles rarer, still way more rare than effervescent, and way worse. If you came back to the game to add all these new weapons and balance some things, how come you didn't make the pearlescents worthwhile? I always ask myself this when they came back to Borderlands 2, how come they didn't fix a few of the little things that have been glaring issues for years? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you. I just wish that something minor like that probably would have taken maybe a day or two to adjust some damage values on those pearlescent weapons to make them worth getting. But you know, we have community modders and community patches for that. Unfortunately, consoles don't have access to this, but for the PC players, they already have the availability for little tiny upgrades like this. But if we're going to go from a gameplay standpoint, I feel like I've speaked about that quite a bit now. I want to kind of talk about the story standpoint, where this was kind of the transitional DLC leading into Borderlands 3, because Borderlands 3 came out the same year. So we were kind of just waiting for Borderlands 3, and this was kind of a hype factor, right? The favorite Borderlands 2 game that everyone critically acclaimed to be one of the best games in the series, all of a sudden has a free DLC. Damn, I'm gonna go check this out. Prepare me for Borderlands 3. This is awesome. And then we see the story, and it's pretty interesting with the whole spore mechanics and how Pandora is changing, but it doesn't reflect at all what happens in Borderlands 3. We don't have any cult mentions in the entire campaign of the fight for Sanctuary. Yes, we save Sanctuary, we kill the spore guy, and then there's spores on Pandora, and that's really it, with some different experiments. But when we go to Borderlands 3, there's not really any mention of this DLC whatsoever. Lilith doesn't even bring it up herself, and we always thought this was a transitional DLC to give us more story. Did this DLC provide more story background? Indeed it did. It did execute in that factor, but for many people, this is kind of confusing if you're coming back expecting a transitional piece into the next game in the franchise. So if it be the glaring plot holes within this entire DLC, or the fact that a lot of the community just generally did not like this scaling factor from OP10, including myself, because I think OP levels were stupid, and I think level caps are stupid, and they added both of those within a singular DLC. But there was some net positives. If you still play on level 72, and you love Borderlands 2, this DLC was great and worth every penny. But for the majority of players that kind of just played this for a little bit, and went back to their grind on another game, it wasn't really all that great. But for the people that are dedicated fans, this added a lot of great features, and a lot more content to do in general. So yeah, again, sorry for my long hiatus, going through stuff, real life stuff, gaming stuff, Twitch stuff, so make sure you check out Twitch, link in the description below and in the comments. comments, and come join me on my Exodus Gauge playthrough as we conquer that mod pack and revisit some Borderlands 2 nostalgia ourselves. But you guys have a terrific day. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Make sure you hit that like button down below as it spreads my content out to the Borderlands community. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on another video from me. But you guys have a terrific day. You stay safe, and I'll see you all later.